Vikings, today the collective name for late Iron Age Scandinavians, originated from Sweden, Norway, and Denmark. They left a permanent mark in history and are known for their raiding, gods, and myths. But what do we know about their use of plants and herbs? How were they connected to healing, intoxication, and magic? There are few that know more about the subject than Jens Heimdahl, Archaeobotanist and PhD at the National Historical Museum in Stockholm, Sweden. He specializes in ancient food, drink, and medicine, as well as the connection between herbs and cultural practices such as religion, magic, and the dead. We met Jens in Birka, one of the most important Viking Age sites in the world. Birka is located in Lake Mälaren in Sweden and was once a bustling trading hub surrounded by a necropolis, a city of the dead consisting of thousands of burial mounds. The site has been researched since the 1800s and has offered us much of what we know about the Viking Age. You will now get a rare glimpse into the not so well-known field of archaeobotany, with information about the importance of brewing, intoxication, berserker rage, magic, healing, burials, and more. We will also bust 3 common Viking myths.
One mead and one beer, please. During the Viking Age in Scandinavia, mead and beer was the 2 most common drinks during parties. In everyday life they drank water and sort of milk, but when it was celebration time it was mead and beer. So if you wanted to show off, you could actually pour some of the mead into the beer, and then you transformed the beer into mead. Beer and mead was not the common day drink during this time. It was a drink for feast, and especially for the annual bloods. It was 3 bloods occurring during the year, one in the early summer and one in the autumn in October during the harvest, and one, perhaps the most important one, was the blood during the winter, the midwinter blood, also called Jul. In Norway there was a law that you were more or less forced to be able to provide your guest with enough beer during the Yule time, so that if you didn't brew enough beer, you could actually be expelled from the country. When a guest arrived at your house, you had to provide him with beer. And when you and the guest became intoxicated, this was a sort of holiness, and the intoxication, the drunkenness that occurred, actually was interpreted as you came in contact with your dead ancestors and also the gods. And this especially is relevant in connection to one of the gods, and that is Odin. If you were a Scandinavian warrior during the Viking Age, the best thing that could happen was that the Valkyria chosen you to be one of the Einherjar, and that is the holy warriors of Odin. In the hall of Odin, all the Einherjar was set down in his hall, And there were more than 400,000 of them, so this must have been a really, really big hole. And in that place, the Valkyria poured up the beer and mead to all those warriors. This ceremony was replicated in the ordinary longhouses as well. And also, it was the drunkenness that was the thing, the holy thing. And this, that the Viking actually came in contact with the gods through drunkenness. This has arisen the question, did they use drugs in other occasions as well? For example, the rage of the berserkers. This is a really mysterious thing that has arisen a lot of questions. Were the berserkers drunk? Did they use some other drug? Or was it just some sort of psychological technique to put them in this really strange state? We don't know, but there have been some suggestions. So what did they put in beer? Well, there's two plants commonly associated with remains of beer brewing, and one of those is hops. And it was not until quite recently that we discovered that the Vikings in Scandinavia, especially in the region of Svealand, was fond of hops. In other places of Sweden, like Götaland, they use another plant called sweetgale or bog myrtle. It is a really, really fragrant plant that grows in bogs, and was used also in later time, in medieval time, and also in early modern times. And especially it was the female cones that was used when you made beer. And there also existed combination of bog myrtle and hop in beers. There is also a third plant that they used in beer, and that plant grows down here. The third candidate, or the third plant that was used in beer brewing and that we find in those brewing remains are this one, and it's called meadowsweet. In English, meadowsweet, the older name of meadowsweet, one of those was actually meadsweet. And it's the same in Sweden. In Sweden, this is called älggräs, which is like moose grass. But the older name was actually ölgräs, which is beer grass. Either this meadowsweet, the hops, or the sweetgale or bog myrtle that we talked about earlier have any intoxicating effects. So none of those plants can have contributed to the berserk rage. So what could they have used? When looking for a clue what this mysterious plant could have been, if there was a plant at all, we could look at the reputation of the bog myrtle, because the reputation of bog myrtle is quite dubious. Perhaps you have heard of the Reinheitsgebot, that is the laws of purity started up in Germany first during the Middle Ages, and they told that you could only have hops, malt and water when you brewed beer. You couldn't have any other strange herbs in the beer. And this was actually a tactical move in order to remove the traders of bog myrtle. The hop traders wanted to get rid of the bog myrtle traders. So they started to tell that if you have bog myrtle in the beer, you actually will become mad. You will become blind, and this is not good, and you will have diarrhea, and this is not good for you. Was all a lie. Or was it? There is another plant that is associated with bog myrtles, and this is this. This is Labrador tea. And in Scandinavia, especially in Sweden, not in Norway and Denmark, this Labrador tea grows at the same places as the bog myrtle. And in Swedish, those names are sometimes, the name of those plants are sometimes mixed up. And there are evidence that Labrador tea was also used in beer brewing during the medieval period, during the 13th century. So probably this was also used in beer. Bog myrtle is not toxic. You won't get any diarrhea or you won't get blind from it. But Labrador tea is actually toxic, and some of the effects described of the bog myrtle might apply for the Labrador tea. The Labrador tea also grows together with another plant, quite similar to bilberries, and this is bog bilberries. They are not poisonous, but in Sweden, the reputation of bog bilberries is not so good. When I was a kid, I was learned that not to pick those because they're poisonous and perhaps you will get mad from it. But that is not true. Perhaps the reputation of bog bilberries is affected of the reputation of the Labrador tea. Because in Slavic myths, there are, from quite late time, there are descriptions of a drink that you make from Labrador tea mixing with bog bilberries. And this drink made men mad. And they also tell that this drink was used by Scandinavian men. An interesting fact is the name of this bog bilberry. In Swedish, it's called odon, or the older names are galenbär or odensbär. In English, this is madness berries or berries of Odin. Could this be a clue to how the berserkers entered the stage of rage? There are many myths about the herbal use during the Viking Age, and I will take 3 of them as example and actually bust them. The first one, that the mushroom fly agaric was used by the berserkers in order to get them angry. But this is not true. This is actually an idea that was lifted by one of the apprentices of Linné, Samuel Ödman, in the 18th century, and he admitted this was just an idea, but many people believed in it. 2. The carrot didn't exist in the Scandinavia during the Viking Age, and the Vikings didn't know about the carrot. But this is not true. We have found many examples of carrots from the Viking Age, so the Vikings know about carrot. 3. The Vikings get high on cannabis. No, the Vikings know about cannabis, but they use this for textiles. And we don't think that the cannabis used by the Vikings had the things in them to be able to use them as drugs either. One of the most well-known plants that was important to the Vikings is onion. And this is because onion is often mentioned in the sources and in rune writings. Why is this so? We don't know. But we have some clues. But we don't even know, did they cultivate onion or did they collect it from wild onion? Here in Birka, they have suggested some onion cultivation, which is quite plausible. One candidate for which onion did they cultivate is actually garlic. I have one here. the garlic was spread to the northern part of Europe by the Romans. So could have been cultivated here in Sweden. We don't know. Another candidate is the so-called potato onion, which is close related to the shallot. A third candidate is the leek, which has been found in the town of York, which was a Viking occupation from that time. So perhaps there were several types of onion that was used. And of course, the onion was used as food. But it's also clear that the onion had magical properties. When the people of Scandinavia started to carve runes in the 2nd or 3rd century, one of the first words that they wrote was onion. In this old language, it was called laukur. And the word laukur on those objects, which could be knives out of bones or like golden objects called bracteates. The word laukur occurs. And it occurs together with other words like alu, which could be beer, and also lina, which could be flax or linen. The meaning of those early carvings are really mysterious, but they are probably magical. And some clues we get if we go into the material of the sagas. For example, when Sigurd, the Fafner's Bane, and his girlfriend Gudrun, there is a tale when Gudrun protects Sigurd from harm, magical harm and poison by putting an onion in his beer. In another case, when Sigurd has died, Gudrun is crying and she compares him that he is like a spear onion among common onions. So the onion was also a symbol of something good. There is a third tale also from the Olav the Holy, in the king that Christianized Norway. And one of the things that he done, he traveled around, and when he encountered old and heathen rituals, he aborted them and get angry, and everybody get Christianized by that way. And in this case, he is at a farm when they have prepared a horse penis with onions and linens around it, and they send it around, and this is some sort of fertility magic. And the connection between onion and linen or flax might be associated with medicine, because in medicine you can boil onion and you have it as a sort of a porridge which you on the wound, and then you have linen above it. And this is a type of medicine and bandage that is known all over Europe at this time. So the association between onion, linen is generally connected to protection magic, and also healing. The medicine during the Viking Age, we actually know something about it. Not much, but something. First of all, it seems that there were specialists in medicine, healers. And those healers seems to have been both men and women, and that this was a respectable job. We also have some older stories from the Roman time, like Tacitus and Caesar, and they describe how the Germans were taken care of medically after battle and so on by their women. So that women had a role in the medicine is quite clear.
There is another interesting aspect with this medical stuff, and that is that when we find medical instruments like lancets, for example, the small tools using in when you do chirurgy, we find them generally close to holy grounds or places where you do magical and religious offering. So the medicine, the medical practice seemed to be connected to those places. There is also another thing. The main medicine seemed to have been herbs. And we don't know what herbs really. Some we know now by archaeology. But the term leknisgräs is used, which means healing herbs. And there has been a lot of speculation of what is those healing herbs. And there were probably many of them. And I think that the most common ones were the most common ones also in the medieval period. And here we have the clues from the names of the plants that in Swedish are sometimes quite old. Like this is yarrow in English, quite good medical plants during the medieval period. This is a probable medical herb also during the Viking Age. And this is greater plantain, which actually means, the Swedish name still means leknisgräs or leknis leaves. But we don't know exactly how they use them. But there is one plant that we perhaps know a little bit more about. One part of the medicine that we know a little bit more about is the birth, or when a woman was giving birth. There is descriptions in the Edda of how to do when you will help a woman give birth. And if you are the helper, the medical woman, so to say, or the healer, you should apply runes, secret runes, on the wrists of the woman who is about to give birth. And then you will sit on your knees together with this woman in her bed when she gives birth. So she gives birth standing on her knees, and you grip her wrist and pray to the Dis and the secret magic songs connected to childbirth. And this quite dramatic scene is one of the things that we know. There is also herbs connected to the birth. But what herbs are those? Perhaps we find a clue in the medieval period. In the town of Nya, which is the coming Göteborg, so to say, in the western part of Sweden, we recently discovered a grave with a woman who has been buried together with her little infant child. And this woman has apparently died in childbirth. And her stomach was full of a herb known as motherwort. The name gives a clue of this herb's use, but it wasn't confirmed in the written sources from older time. But this find of the woman who died in childbirth and with this herb in her stomach proves that this herb was in use by midwives during the early medieval period. And perhaps it was also older, because this herb is not mentioned in the Swedish written sources describing the healing herbs, but it is really, really common to find in common people's household. They really liked this herb, and perhaps it was because the midwives was not a part of the medical society making written sources. It was a people's knowledge. This is the hemland on Björkö, and that is the grave field that surrounds the town Birka. So the people of Birka was surrounded by another town, a necropole of their dead. And also in graves we find traces of plants. The first plants that we discovered this way was mainly food plants like berries, nuts and cereals, apparently working as a sort of gifts for the dead, so that they should have something to eat when they were in the kingdom of dead. But there are also other plants that we start to discover. Among those are the plants that works as a sort of beds for the dead. In one grave, for example, we find this like sort of fern that the dead were placed on. What does this mean? Was the fern a common thing to rest on when you rested, or is it specifically connected to grave and death? And recently we find also traces of this plant. This is yellow flag. As you can see, really long leaves, and they actually, when they are fresh, they resemble of swords. So in Swedish this is sword lily, more or less. And this was the name also during the medieval period. And in the grave where we find this, it was an old lady, quite a short old lady. She was just 150. And on her grave, which was a lot of different herbs, there were seeds, a lot of seeds from this plant. And she was resting on them. And we don't know what it means, but there is so much left to discover. Sometimes we find specific plants that seems to be associated with the profession of the buried person, like in graves of vulvas, magical specialists and seers. In one grave in Denmark particularly, there was a plant found in a pouch that she carried. And this plant is very special, and it probably is connected to her seery, her seid, and her magic. This is the plant that was found in her grave. And this is henbane, a really poisonous plant with a bad reputation. Because if you take it, you can use it as a narcotic, and you can die from it if you take too much. And within this little perch that was found on the vulva, there were 300 seeds of this henbane. And probably it's because one of those capsules contained about 300 seeds. And together with these henbane seeds, there was bones from pig and a small ball that an owl has puked up. I'm not sure about the English term for that, sorry. Really strange combination. And the find of henbane in this vulva grave started a lot of speculations. Could this has been used by the vulva in her magic? And how was it used? The henbane is actually quite known in all Europe in this time, and also in earlier times in the antique, in Greece and Rome. It was used for medicine, for pain ache, for example, and you could make people sleep from it, and it was also used as a poison. And there are some interesting connection with the stories about the oracle in Delphi, Apollo's oracle. And there might be some connection between the old names of the henbane and the oracle of Apollo. And this has made scientists speculating about, was the oracle drugged when she gave her visions? And it is interesting that again, also in Scandinavia, but in a bit later times, we have again a magical practice connected with divination that is perhaps connected to this plant. But what did the bones from pig and this other material in the same bag do there? Actually, I think that this might be a magical amulet. Perhaps the henbane was just there as a magical ingredient, working in some way magical for the vulva. Perhaps she didn't use it as a drug directly. If you use henbane as a drug, one way to do it is to put it on fire and to inhale the fumes. This was a well-known practice in magic in Europe at the same time as the Viking Age. So this is possible. Recently, we have found evidence that people in Scandinavia actually smoked henbane seeds. First, we find them in the early medieval places around the hearth in houses, and this is some 100 years after the Viking Age. But lately, we have also found them in the longhouses from the Viking Age. So, people in longhouses in Sweden in the Viking Age were actually smoking henbane seeds. Why? Was it a part of the Seid, the magical visions of the vulva, or was it perhaps even some ritual connected to the berserkers? We don't know. These were some stories about the herbal practices during the Viking Age. Some of this is archaeological knowledge and historical knowledge, and as you might have noticed, there are some also speculations and things we don't really know yet. Hopefully we will do that in the future by making new excavations and new research. Thank you.